There are moments when thought begins to feel less like a tool and more like a tremor, a subtle vibration running through the architecture of the mind. In those moments, you may have been told, gently, dismissively, or with concern, that you are overthinking. The phrase lands like a closed door, implying excess miscalibration, a mind spinning its wheels in place. Yet, what if the sensation is not the sign of a malfunction, but a proximity? What if what you are feeling is not cognitive noise, but the quiet pressure of awareness pressing against its own boundary? To say, you're not overthinking, you're touching the edge of awareness, is to reframe the experience entirely, to suggest that what feels like overwhelm may actually be contact with something vast, something just beyond the familiar contours perception. Awareness, like an ocean, does not announce where it ends. Most of daily life is spent near the shore, where the water is shallow and predictable, where language works cleanly and cause and effect appears linear. We name things, sort them, schedule them, and call this mastery. But occasionally, a person wanders farther out, not intentionally, perhaps, but through curiosity, sensitivity, pain, wonder, or love, and suddenly the ground beneath thought drops away. The mind tries to map what it senses, looping back on itself, revisiting the same questions from different angles, not because it is broken, but because it has reached a place where ordinary maps no longer apply. The looping is not failure. It is friction at the boundary between the known and the knowable. In such moments, metaphors begin to replace conclusions. You might feel as though you are standing in a hallway lined with mirrors, each reflection slightly altered, each thought spawning another that looks familiar yet subtly distorted. Or you might feel like an astronomer staring too long into the night sky, where the abundance of stars makes constellations dissolve. The mind strains not because it is too much to say, but because it senses more than it can yet articulate. This is a paradox of awareness at its edge. Clarity and confusion arrive together, inseparable twins. Modern culture often prizes decisiveness over depth, speed over stillness. In such an environment, sustained reflection can be misdiagnosed as rumination, and existential sensitivity can be mistaken for anxiety. Yet throughout history, those who have expanded the boundaries of understanding, philosophers, mystics, scientists, artists, have all described a phase where thinking intensified, not to find immediate answers, but to learn how to sit with better questions. They stood at the threshold where language falters and intuition sharpens, where certainty dissolves and curiosity becomes a primary mode of being. What we now call overthinking may be the contemporary name for this ancient threshold experience. To touch the edge of awareness is to notice the scaffolding behind experience. It is to realize, sometimes with awe and sometimes with dread, that your thoughts are not just reactions to the world, but lenses shaping it. You begin to sense patterns beneath patterns, motivations beneath motivations, and assumptions quietly governing entire emotional landscapes. This can feel destabilizing. If the floor you have always stood on turns out to be a construct, what else might be provisional? The mind responds by circling, probing, testing, returning again and again to the same ideas, not out of obsession, but out of a deep, almost biological need to orient itself in newly perceived terrain. There is also an intimacy to this edge. When awareness deepens, it often does so through feeling rather than logic. You may become acutely aware of time passing, of the fragility of moments, of the strange miracle that anything exists at all. Thoughts grow dense not because they are trivial, but because they are loaded with meaning. A single sentence, a memory, or a fleeting interaction can unfold into layers of implication. The mind lingers because it senses that something essential is hidden there, like light trapped in crystal, waiting for the right angle to reveal itself. Yet standing at this edge without guidance can feel lonely. Others may urge you to just relax or stop thinking so much, unaware that what you are doing is not compulsive but exploratory. You are not chasing reassurance. You are listening for resonance. You are not trying to solve life like a puzzle. You are trying to feel its shape. This distinction matters. Overthinking implies excess without purpose, while touching the edge of awareness implies contact, responsiveness, a dialogue between the finite mind and something larger than it. This exploration begins from the premise that such moments are not pathologies to be eliminated, but signals to be interpreted. They suggest that awareness is stretching, that perception is recalibrating, that the familiar self is negotiating with a wider field of understanding. like muscles after unfamiliar exertion. The mind aches not because it is damaged, but because it is adapting. The discomfort is real, but so is the expansion. As we move deeper into this inquiry, we will trace the contours of this edge, how it appears, why it feels the way it does, and what it asks of those who encounter it. We will explore the themes that recur whenever awareness approaches its own limits, the symbols that cultures have used to describe this terrain, and the ways such experiences can be integrated into ordinary life without losing their depth or becoming overwhelmed by them. This is not an argument against clarity or rest, but an invitation to reconsider what certain kinds of mental intensity might actually signify. For now, let this introduction serve as a gentle reorientation. If you have felt a strange mix of exhaustion and aliveness that comes from thinking deeply, if you have sensed that your questions are less about answers and more about alignment, consider the possibility that you are not malfunctioning. You may simply be standing where the mind begins to glimpse its own horizon. That horizon can feel dizzying, but it is also where new ways of seeing are born. When awareness approaches its own edge, certain themes begin to surface with remarkable consistency, as though they are etched into the architecture of consciousness itself. These themes are not doctrines to be memorized, but gravitational centers around which thought naturally orbits when it ventures beyond the habitual. They emerge quietly at first, often disguised as discomfort or restlessness, yet over time they reveal themselves as guiding currents shaping the experience of thinking too much. To understand them is not to pin them down, but to feel how they move through the inner landscape, bending perception and rearranging priorities. One of the first themes to arise is the tension between surface explanations and underlying patterns. Ordinary thinking is often satisfied with immediate causes. This happened because of that, I feel this because of that. But as awareness deepens, these explanations begin to feel thin, almost translucent. You start to sense that events are not isolated points, but intersections of longer arcs, that emotions carry histories far older than the present moment. The mind returns again and again to the same experiences, not because it's failed to understand them, but because it intuits that there is more there than the initial story revealed. This is where the accusation of overthinking often appears. Yet what is really happening is a refusal to accept shallow closure where depth is available. Closely related to this is the theme of illusion versus underlying reality. At the edge of awareness, the familiar structures of identity, success, time, and even self begin to shimmer. They do not vanish, but they lose their apparent solidity. You may notice how roles you inhabit feel strangely performative, how beliefs you once held unquestioningly now seem contingent, inherited, or context-bound. This can be unsettling because the mind prefers firm ground. Yet this unsettling quality is also a signal. Perception is beginning to distinguish between what is constructed for convenience and what feels intrinsically true. Thought intensifies here because it is attempting to reconcile lived experience with this new, less rigid understanding of reality. Another core concept is the recursive nature of consciousness. At the edge of awareness, thought becomes aware of itself thinking. You notice not only what you think, but how you think, why certain thoughts arise, and what emotional charge they carry. This self-referential quality can feel like being caught in a hall of mirrors, but it is also a sign of meta-awareness emerging. The mind is no longer only processing information. It is observing its own processes. This observation generates more thoughts, which are then observed in turn, creating the impression of endless mental motion. Yet beneath this motion lies a subtle stillness, the awareness that is watching the entire process unfold. There is also the theme of scale. As awareness expands, the scale at which you perceive life begins to shift. Individual moments are no longer isolated blips, but expressions of longer narratives, and personal concerns start to exist alongside larger questions about meaning, impermanence, and connection. You might find yourself thinking about your life in relation to generations past and future, or about human concerns against the backdrop of cosmic time. This shift in scale can make everyday problems feel both heavier and lighter at once. Heavier because they are seen as part of something vast, lighter because they are no longer the whole story. The mind works hard here, trying to hold multiple scales simultaneously, which again can feel like overthinking when it is actually an expansion of contextual awareness. A quieter but equally powerful theme is sensitivity to coherence. At the edge of awareness, inconsistency becomes harder to ignore. You may feel disturbed by gaps between values and actions, between what is said and what is felt, between how things appear and how they actually function. The mind revisits conversations, decisions, and beliefs not to punish itself, but to seek alignment. This is not mere analysis. It is an ethical and existential tuning process. Thought circles because it is listening for a note of truth that resonates through all levels of experience, a coherence that feels right not just intellectually, but somatically and emotionally. Underlying all of these themes is the concept of threshold. To touch the edge of awareness is to inhabit a liminal space, neither fully anchored in old certainties nor yet settled into new ones. Thresholds are inherently uncomfortable because they lack clear rules. You are no longer asleep to complexity, but not yet fluent in navigating it. The mind responds by oscillating, testing boundaries, retreating and advancing in small movements. This oscillation is often misread as indecision or obsession, but is better understood as calibration. Awareness is learning its own range, discovering how far it can extend without losing integrity. What unites these themes is that they are not problems to be solved, but processes to be lived through. They suggest that what feels like excessive thinking may actually be the mind adjusting to a broader field of perception. Overthinking, in this light, is a misnomer. There is not too much thought, but thought operating in a domain where its usual shortcuts no longer suffice. The repetition, the questioning, the sense of hovering just short of resolution, all of these are signatures of awareness encountering its own depth. As we move forward, it becomes useful to explore how cultures, myths, and symbolic narratives have given shape to these experiences. Long before modern psychology, humans told stories about wanderers at the edge of the world, about heroes descending into underworlds, or sages confronting paradoxes that could not be neatly resolved. These stories are not escapist fantasies. They are maps drawn in metaphor, offering guidance to those who find themselves at similar inner thresholds. In them, we may recognize our own experience of touching the edge of awareness, translated into timeless images and journeys. When direct explanation begins to fray at the edges, symbol steps in to carry meaning where literal language cannot. This is why, throughout human history, the experience of standing at the threshold of awareness has so often been expressed through story rather than statement. Symbols are not decorations. They are compression algorithms for insight, capable of holding contradictions without resolving them and of pointing beyond themselves without collapsing into vagueness. To explore the symbolic narrative surrounding the sensation of overthinking is to discover that this experience has always been understood, though rarely named in modern terms. One recurring narrative is that of the wanderer who leaves the village at dusk. In countless mythic traditions, there is a figure who departs from the safety of the known world, often driven not by ambition, but by unease. The village represents consensus reality, the shared agreements about what matters and how life is to be lived. The wanderer does not leave because the village is evil, but because it is incomplete. Something in them senses unanswered questions humming beneath daily routines. As the wanderer moves into forest or desert, familiar signposts disappear. They begin to doubt their direction, retrace their steps, and question their own judgment. From the outside, this looks like aimless wandering. From within, it is the mind adjusting to a landscape where intuition must replace habit. This is a symbolic ancestor of what we now call overthinking. Movement without immediate clarity, guided by an inner pull rather than an external map. Another powerful symbol is the mirror, especially the mirror that reflects more than expected. In myths and fairy tales, mirrors often reveal hidden truths, alternate selves, or unsettling perspectives. To stand before such a mirror is to confront the multiplicity within. At the edge of awareness, thought behaves like such a mirror, reflecting not just oneself, but many. The self who acts, the self who observes, the self who doubts, the self who hopes. This multiplication can feel disorienting. You may ask which reflection is real, which one to trust. The symbolic lesson is that all are real, yet none are final. Awareness expands by learning to hold these reflections without collapsing into any single one. The mind's apparent fixation is actually an attempt to integrate these facets into a more spacious sense of self. Descent myths also speak directly to this territory. Stories of journeys into the underworld, whether in ancient epics or psychological allegories, depict a necessary movement downward, into darkness, ambiguity, and silence. In these narratives, the descent is not punishment but initiation. The hero or seeker often becomes preoccupied, introspective, and withdrawn during this phase, their thoughts turning inward again and again. They grapple with shadows, unresolved memories, and paradoxes that resist easy resolution. This is the symbolic language of deep thinking that cannot be hurried. The descent teaches that not all clarity comes from illumination. Some understanding is forged by staying with the dark long enough for it to reveal its own contours. There is also the symbol of the labyrinth, a structure designed not to confuse maliciously, but to slow the traveler into presence. Unlike a maze, a labyrinth has no dead ends. It leads inevitably to its center, though the path winds back on itself many times. Walking a labyrinth, one repeatedly feels close to the center only to find oneself far away again. This pattern mirrors the experience of revisiting the same thoughts from slightly altered perspectives. Each pass deepens familiarity, even if progress is not linear. The symbolic insight here is that repetition does not equal stagnation. At the edge of awareness, circling is often how depth is achieved. Perhaps one of the most striking symbols is that of the threshold guardian. In myth, before entering a new realm, the traveler encounters a figure who questions, challenges, or obstructs them. This guardian is not an enemy, but a test of readiness. Doubt, anxiety, and the internal voice that says this is too much function as such guardians. They demand discernment. Are you chasing novelty, or are you responding to a genuine call? The mind's increased activity at this point is a dialogue with the guardian, a negotiation between the comfort of retreat and the risk of transformation. Overthinking, seen symbolically, is the sound of this negotiation unfolding. These narratives converge on a single insight. The edge of awareness is not a place of arrival, but a passage. Symbols arise because they can guide without constraining, suggest without dictating. They allow the experiencer to recognize that what feels uniquely personal is also deeply archetypal. You are not the first to stand here, nor will you be the last. The same patterns are played out across cultures, encoded in stories precisely because they recur whenever human awareness stretches beyond its familiar limits. To engage with these symbols is not to escape into fantasy, but to gain orientation. They remind us that the mind's intensity at this threshold has meaning, direction, and potential. They offer reassurance that confusion can be part of coherence, and that the feeling of being lost may indicate that you have left a map that no longer fits the territory. In recognizing the symbolic dimension of your experience, the inner narrative begins to shift. You are no longer trapped in excessive thought. You are participating in an ancient journey of perception and integration. Yet symbols alone are not enough. The challenge remains how to live with this awareness in the midst of ordinary responsibilities, relationships, and demands. How does one carry the insights of the threshold back into daily life without becoming alienated or overwhelmed? This question draws us toward the practical implications of touching the edge of awareness, toward the art of integration that allows depth to inform action rather than paralyze it. The return from the edge of awareness is rarely marked by fanfare. There is no clear moment when the mind announces that it has gathered what it came for and is now ready to resume ordinary functioning. Instead, integration happens subtly, like sediment settling in water after a storm. The challenge is not to abandon depth for practicality, nor to drown in contemplation, but to allow the two to inform one another until they become inseparable. This is where the experience of intense thinking reveals its real-world value, not as an abstract insight, but as a quiet reorientation of how one lives. One of the first shifts that occurs is in the relationship to thoughts themselves. When awareness has touched its edge, thoughts are no longer automatically identified with. They are seen more as weather patterns passing through a wider sky. This does not eliminate mental activity, but it changes its texture. Instead of trying to suppress recurring thoughts or force resolution, there is an emerging capacity to let them unfold without immediate reaction. In practical terms, this can look like pausing before responding, noticing emotional undercurrents in conversations, or allowing uncertainty to remain unresolved without rushing to fill the gap. What once felt like overthinking begins to transform into a form of listening. This listening quality has tangible effects on relationships. When you are attuned to deeper layers of awareness, you become more sensitive to what is not being said. You may notice the unspoken fears behind defensiveness, the longing beneath irritation, the fatigue masked by competence. This sensitivity can be challenging as it exposes you to emotional complexity that others may not be ready to acknowledge. Yet it also opens a possibility for more authentic connection. Conversations slow down, judgment soften, and empathy becomes less of a moral effort and more of a natural response. The mind's earlier intensity finds an outlet in presence rather than analysis. Decision-making also changes under the influence of this expanded awareness. Choices are no longer evaluated solely on efficiency or immediate payoff, but on resonance. You may find yourself asking not just whether something works, but whether it aligns. This can create friction in environments that prioritize speed and certainty, as alignment is a subtler metric. It requires patience, attunement, and sometimes the courage to choose paths that are less obvious but feel internally coherent. The practical implication is not indecisiveness, but a deeper form of commitment, one that is less likely to fracture under pressure because it is grounded in a felt sense of rightness. There's also an impact on how you relate to productivity and rest. At the edge of awareness, it becomes clear that constant output is not synonymous with value. Periods of apparent inactivity, reflection, contemplation, simply being, are recognized as fertile rather than wasteful. This recognition can be difficult to integrate in cultures that equate worth with busyness, yet it is essential for sustainability. When deep thinking is honored as part of the creative and ethical process, rest becomes an active ingredient rather than an afterthought. Life begins to pulse between engagement and withdrawal in a more organic rhythm, on a more grounded level. This integration often manifests as increased discernment about inputs. Media, conversations, and environment are felt more acutely, and you may notice a growing need to curate what you expose yourself to. This is not about withdrawal from the world, but about stewardship of attention. When awareness has expanded, attention becomes precious. You may choose depth over volume, quality over quantity, and silence over noise more often than before. These choices, though subtle, accumulate into a life that feels less scattered and more intentional. Importantly, integration also involves humility. Touching the edge of awareness does not grant omniscience. It reveals how much remains unknown. This realization can soften the need to be right or to impose conclusions on others. In practical terms, this humility translates into openness to feedback, willingness to revise beliefs, and comfort with saying, "I don't know." Such attitudes are not signs of weakness, but of psychological resilience. They allow you to navigate complexity without collapsing into defensiveness or paralysis. Perhaps the most profound real-world implication is a shift in how meaning is experienced. Instead of being something to be achieved or possessed, meaning becomes something that emerges through attention. Ordinary moments, walking, listening, working, are infused with a quiet significance because they are no longer merely instrumental. They are recognized as expressions of a larger, unfolding process. The mind that once churned now participates. Thought becomes a companion to life rather than an obstacle to it. This integration is ongoing. There is no final state where awareness remains permanently expanded without effort. The edge is something you touch again and again, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unexpectedly. Each return offers an opportunity to bring a little more depth into the ordinary, a little more spaciousness into the pressured, a little more kindness into the complex. The practical art lies in allowing this process to continue without dramatizing it or diminishing it. As we approach the final movement of this exploration, the question becomes less about understanding and more about invitation. What does it mean to live as someone who has recognized that overthinking may actually be a signal of awakening awareness? How does one answer that recognition with courage, patience, and care? These questions guide us toward concluding reflection that gathers all threads into a single, transformative call. To arrive at the end of this exploration is not to step away from the edge of awareness, but to learn how to stand there without fear. The edge is not a cliff meant to be avoided, nor a summit meant to be conquered. It is a horizon, an ever-receding line where perception meets mystery, where understanding gives way to humility, and where the mind learns that its greatest strength is not control, but contact. What once felt like overthinking now reveals itself as a sensitivity to this horizon, a responsiveness to the subtle signals that something deeper is asking to be acknowledged. When all the strands are gathered, the initial discomfort, the recurring themes, the symbolic journeys, and the practical integrations, a quiet truth emerges. Awareness does not expand to make life more complicated. It expands to make life more honest. The complexity you sense was already there. The questions you could not stop asking were not inventions of an anxious mind, but responses to a reality that is richer and more layered than surface explanations allow. Overthinking was a name given to the moment when your inner world began to outgrow the language you had for it. The transformation, then, is not about thinking less, but about thinking differently. It is about allowing thought to become porous rather than rigid, inquisitive rather than compulsive. It is about recognizing when the mind is trying to dominate experience and when it is trying to listen. At the edge of awareness, the task is not to silence thought, but to place it in service of something wider: presence, coherence, and connection. Thought becomes one sense among many, no longer the sole authority, but an articulate participant in a larger field of knowing. There is a courage required here, because living at this horizon means relinquishing certain comforts. Quick answers lose their appeal. Absolute certainty becomes suspect. You may find yourself less impressed by declarations and more moved by questions that remain open yet alive. This can feel like vulnerability, but it is also a form of strength. To live without prematurely closing inquiry is to trust that meaning is not fragile, that it does not need to be protected by rigid conclusions. Meaning, in this view, is something that deepens through engagement, not something that evaporates under scrutiny. The transformational call embedded in this understanding is gentle but profound. It asks you to stop treating your sensitivity as a flaw and start treating it as a responsibility. If you sense more, you are invited to care more, not in the sense of carrying the world's weight, but in the sense of responding with discernment. You are called to cultivate practices that support integration rather than fragmentation, to create spaces where reflection can mature into insight and insight into action. This might look like slowing down certain decisions, speaking more honestly in relationships, or choosing work that aligns with your deeper values, even when it demands patience. It also calls for compassion toward yourself in moments when the edge feels overwhelming. Awareness expands unevenly. There will be days when the horizon feels inspiring and days when it feels exhausting. The transformation is not measured by constant clarity, but by the ability to return to center without self-reproach. Each time you recognize that your mind's intensity is not an enemy, you weaken the old reflex to judge yourself for thinking deeply. In its place grows a steadier trust in your capacity to navigate complexity without losing warmth or grounding. Perhaps most importantly, this call invites you to become a quiet counterweight in a world that often rushes past its own depth. By embodying a way of being that honors reflection without paralysis, curiosity without chaos, and awareness without detachment, you offer something rare. You demonstrate that it is possible to live thoughtfully without being consumed by thought, to touch the edge of awareness without falling into abstraction. Your presence itself becomes a form of translation, showing that depth and practicality are not opposites, but partners. In the end, you're not overthinking. You're touching the edge of awareness. Is less a reassurance and more an orientation. It points you toward a way of inhabiting your inner life with respect rather than resistance. It suggests that the very experiences that once made you doubt yourself may be the ones shaping you into someone capable of holding nuance, ambiguity, and meaning with grace. The horizon will continue to move as you move, but you no longer need to chase it or fear it. You can walk alongside it, letting it guide without demanding arrival. This is a quiet transformation available here. Not a dramatic awakening, but sustained attunement, a life lived in dialogue with its own depth, a mind that knows when to question and when to rest, an awareness that recognizes its own edges not as limits, but as invitations to remain awake.